California sun blazed over the film set, casting long, sharp shadows across the dusty terrain. The rolling hills and sparse vegetation in the background were a perfect backdrop for the Western being filmed, a genre once king of Hollywood, now considered a relic of the past by studio executives who preferred superhero blockbusters and CGI spectacles. Yet there was still one man who embodied the spirit of classic cinema, and that man was Clint Eastwood. Dressed in a simple button-up shirt, dark jeans, and boots, Eastwood stood calmly near his mark. His piercing blue eyes surveyed the film set with quiet authority, his lean frame as imposing as ever. Even at his age, he had a presence that demanded respect. He had been in countless productions, directed some of the most iconic films of all time, and had nothing left to prove. To the older members of the crew, those who had grown up watching Dirty Harry, The Outlaw Josey Wales, and Unforgiven, this was a legendary moment. They knew they were in the presence of a true cinematic master, but to one man this was just another day on set. Mason Carter, the film's young, brash director, was Hollywood's golden boy. At just 33 years old, he had already directed 2 summer blockbusters, both filled with high-energy chase sequences, CGI-heavy action, and rapid-fire editing designed to keep young audiences engaged. Today he was directing Clint Eastwood, or so he thought. Carter clapped his hands, snapping the crew into focus. "All right, listen up. Scene 22, the saloon confrontation. This is a big one, people. We need energy, movement, intensity. Let's keep it moving. No wasted time." The crew scrambled into action. Lights were adjusted, cameras prepped, actors positioned. The cinematographer checked his angles, ensuring that everything was lined up for a smooth take. Carter, grinning with youthful enthusiasm, strode over to Eastwood, exuding the confidence of a man who had never been challenged. "Clint, my man, great to have you here," he said, his tone a little too casual. Eastwood gave a slow nod, his expression unreadable. "Been ready all morning." Carter chuckled, clapping Eastwood on the back as if they were old friends. "Love that. Love it. Listen, I know you're a legend. Huge fan, by the way. But just so we're clear, we're keeping this tight, high energy, and fast-paced. None of that slow, brooding cowboy stuff, all right?" A few crew members froze. Did he really just say that? To Clint Eastwood? Eastwood didn't react immediately. He simply studied Carter, his eyes cold, steady, and unreadable. Carter grinned, mistaking the silence for approval. "I mean, don't get me wrong, I love the old westerns. But audiences today, they don't have patience for that anymore. We're going for something more modern. Think more Marvel movie, less the good, the bad, and the ugly." A few young crew members chuckled awkwardly, not sure whether they should laugh. Eastwood nodded slowly, letting the words settle in. "Marvel movie, huh?" Carter's smile widened. "Exactly. You get it." There was a pause. Then Eastwood spoke. "I get that you don't know what the hell you're talking about." The set went completely silent. Carter's grin froze. Sorry, what?" Eastwood took a slow step forward, his towering presence suddenly filling the space. "You think filmmaking is about moving fast?" Eastwood said, his voice calm but sharp as a knife. "You think it's about keeping attention with quick edits, constant motion, but you're wrong." Carter shifted slightly, his earlier confidence starting to waver. Eastwood's eyes locked onto him, unblinking, measured, dangerous in their stillness. "You don't make a scene pop by moving the camera every 2 seconds," Eastwood said. "You don't create intensity by yelling, 'Faster, faster, faster,' like some kid hopped up on energy drinks." The crew stood frozen, hanging on to every word. "You build tension," Eastwood continued, his voice lowering, yet somehow growing stronger. "You build it by holding still, by letting the audience feel something, by making them wait." Carter swallowed, his confidence now visibly shaken. Eastwood wasn't done. "You see, kid," he said, stepping even closer, his voice deadly calm. "Anyone can make an explosion look cool, but not everyone can make a stare feel like an explosion." The entire set stayed dead silent. A few of the older crew members smirked knowingly, while the younger ones looked at Carter, waiting to see how he'd react. Carter opened his mouth, then closed it, He wanted to argue, wanted to say something clever, but for the first time he was completely out of his depth. He had spent years thinking he understood film, but now, face to face with Clint Eastwood, he realized he knew nothing. Clint Eastwood wasn't just an actor, he was cinema itself. Carter stood still, his mind racing, his ego visibly bruised. The entire crew had just witnessed a masterclass in filmmaking, one that took less than an hour, but had left a bigger impact than any fancy camera trick, multi-million-dollar CGI set piece, or overproduced action sequence. And the worst part? It wasn't just Clint Eastwood's presence or the fact that the scene turned out flawless. It was the realization, the gut-punch truth that Carter had spent years chasing trends, forcing speed, and overcomplicating something that was already pure. For the first time, he felt out of his depth. He wasn't used to being the one in the wrong. Carter was Hollywood's golden boy, a young director whose fast-paced, high-energy style had made him a studio favorite. He was the guy who brought in the big bucks, whose films were packed with big-name actors, breathtaking stunts, and relentless editing to keep the audience glued to the screen. He had been praised as a visionary. And yet, here he was, standing in front of a living legend, realizing that maybe, just maybe, he still had a lot to learn. The crew was still talking about the scene, murmuring amongst themselves, some of them sneaking glances at Carter, wondering how he'd react. He had a choice. He could pretend he was still right, double down on his flashy methods, keep forcing the modern Hollywood approach that he had been told was the only way to keep audiences engaged. Or he could accept that he had just learned something he wasn't expecting to learn today. Carter let out a slow breath, arms still crossed. "All right," he muttered, shaking his head. "I'll give you this one." Eastwood, standing nearby, turned slightly, raising an eyebrow. "You don't have to give me anything, kid," he said. "The audience will decide for you." Carter chuckled dryly, rubbing his face with both hands. Yeah, I guess they will." But then, before Eastwood could walk away, Carter called out to him, "Wait." Eastwood paused. Carter glanced around, seeing how the crew still looked at Eastwood with something more than just respect. It was reverence. And for the first time, Carter wanted to understand. "You've been doing this longer than I've been alive," Carter said, forcing himself to let go of his pride. "So tell me, what's the secret?" Eastwood didn't answer immediately. Instead, he took his time, looking over the set, watching as the cinematographer reviewed the footage with a newfound sense of awe, as the actors talked quietly, still in the headspace Eastwood had helped them find. Then finally he spoke. "The secret," he said, his voice even, steady. "There is no secret." Carter frowned. "What do you mean?" Eastwood turned fully, stepping closer. "You all want a formula," he said, gesturing toward the cameras. The crew, the towering lights that cast dramatic shadows over the saloon doors. "You want the perfect technique, the right camera moves, the magic pacing that makes a scene pop." Carter nodded, expecting an answer that would give him a new cinematic trick to master, but Eastwood just shook his head. "It's not about any of that," he said. "It's about the audience." Carter stayed quiet, listening now, not just hearing, but absorbing. Eastwood's voice lowered slightly, but his words still hit like a hammer. "You don't have to chase their attention," he said. "You have to earn it." The words landed like a punch to the gut. Carter had spent his whole career thinking he had to fight for every second of the audience's focus. That if a scene wasn't loud, fast, and explosive, it would be forgotten. But now, standing here, looking at the legend in front of him, he realized. The greatest filmmakers don't fight for attention. They demand it. Not by screaming at the audience, but by giving them something worth watching. Carter ran a hand through his hair, finally nodding. "Damn," he muttered. "All right, Clint, you win this one." Eastwood smirked. "Kid," he said, his signature grin appearing. "I won this one before we even started rolling." And with that, he walked off, leaving Mason Carter standing in the middle of the set. No longer just a director, but a student. And for the first time, he was okay with that. 1 week later, the footage from that day had spread like wildfire across the production team. Every single person who watched the dailies saw something different about that scene. It had weight, it had suspense, it had a magic that no amount of CGI or fast editing could replicate. The producers were blown away. Even the executives, who normally only cared about marketability and box office potential, saw that what Eastwood had done was something timeless. And Carter? Carter spent hours watching the footage over and over again. Not because he was trying to break it down into a formula, but because, for the first time, he truly appreciated what filmmaking could be. It wasn't about speed. It wasn't about constant movement. It was about trusting the audience, about knowing that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is wait. And so, on the next day of shooting, something changed. The crew could feel it. Mason Carter, the cocky young director, was no longer rushing through takes. He was watching the actors. He was listening. And when the lead actor delivered a particularly powerful moment, Carter let the camera linger, holding the shot for just an extra few seconds. The result? Pure, unfiltered cinema. As he watched the monitor, Carter nodded to himself, a small smirk forming on his lips. Maybe, just maybe, he was finally starting to get it. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that inspire and challenge us to grow. What would you have done if you were in his shoes? Let us know in the comments below.